Okay, I'm gonna do a quick tutorial on the arm. I had shaped these arms using the lattice tool, but we're gonna try it a different way. Right now I have everything set up here in layers, and over here I have everything set up in their individual polygons, which are basically shown by the icon as a plane on the left. I'm gonna actually turn off the reference images too and turn off the arms so you can see how this is kind of all separate components. And going back to this image, and I'm looking at my side X view, I'm going to go ahead and do this sphere and just kind of create it. And you don't really see it here, but it's up there. And I'm just going to zoom out, or it's actually down there, but I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to pull it up. And it's in X-ray mode on this graph, meaning that right now I have it so I can see the actual drawing. X-ray mode is turned on. I'm going to minimize it, just pressing R on my keyboard and going on this center blue square. I'm going to pull it down till it's about the size of what I think it should be. And again, I'm going to click up and bring it up, and it's rotated on, it looks like it should be at that line, but I'm actually going to rotate this. So I'm pressing Option, I'm dragging it up. I'm going to press E on my keyboard, and I'm going to rotate on this outer yellow circle, which is basically a perpendicular plane to the camera that I'm looking at. And I'm just going to rotate it to about there. This is just a way of doing it, and I hope it works for you guys too. Now, right now, we can see over here that this sphere is in the center of this Lego person. So I'm going to move this sphere over until it hits up on that right arm, and I can kind of see it there. I've just kind of like placed it over. It hasn't really moved anywhere here. At least doesn't look like it moved anywhere, but it's moving. So again, I'm going to go back to this view, this panel, and I'm going to select it and put it into face mode in one of these selections. So it's hard to actually access it sometimes for me. So I usually just turn off what's not being used, and then it goes into these like this different panel by right clicking. So I'm going to go and put this in the face mode and select half the faces. And there might be a way to actually just lasso it. So I'm just going to lasso this and draw this kind of around. Delete that, and then lasso that, and delete those. So now I should have, and this is another selection tool that's not just clicking and dragging. It was over here in this window pane. So I'm going to go back to this arrow. I'm going to press Option, and I'm going to look at this empty hollow sphere inside. And really, I want it to have a face on it right on the edge. So again, I'm going to select object mode and put on that thing under mesh that says fill hole, so that the whole thing is filled. So I currently have my drawing off my image plane, my reference file, but I'm going to kind of guess with the reference file on how to make this kind of shape. And I'm going to actually do it differently than what we were talking about in class. I'm going to go to curves, and I'm going to click this last curve here, which is the Bezier curve. And this you can find in Illustrator and Photoshop. There's other curves here, and again, you can kind of see what you have. I use this 3-point circular arc a lot, but I think this Bezier will work. Now it depends, it does depend where you start with putting the points. Because I'm in this side view, I think the easiest way would be to start building this Bezier in this side view. And I'm just going to stop right there with 3 points. If you kind of discreetly look over here, the Bezier went in the center of my whole model, and we can kind of see it here again. I want to move this whole curve out. So it might have gone way out. Like I think it's in the center, but yeah, it's in the center. And I'm gonna actually move it underneath that arm. And so now it should be roughly there. I can still see it up here. It needs to be kind of moved again. That pivot point is way down here. So I'm gonna actually center that pivot point by going into modify center pivot, and it'll bring the pivot point back up here. And I'm just going to get that curve kind of in the middle of that filled sphere, half sphere. I want that bend to be there, and really it could almost be like touching it, so it could be inserted a little bit. So you can see in this front view, it looks pretty flat, that curve, and it turns into a blue line, but it's also bent here. And I want to bend out that curve a little bit more because I know the arm doesn't just go straight back. So in doing that, I think I can right click, and go to control vertex. And this will allow me to control the points where the arm bends. So in the front view, if I select this one, I'm going to drag it out a little bit. And I'm actually going to drag the wrist one out a little bit too. So it should still be bent in that fashion, but it's bent on two different axes. So it's bent on this x-axis and bent on what would be I think this would be the z-axis, but probably not. It's a different axis. It's coming out. So you can kind of see it could even be bent a little bit more. So I could kind of bring the arm out like that. I could even move it down some. And it's good to have to see that curve can even be changed at the points. So I might even bend it out like that a little bit. And so her arm is really kind of just, at a multitude of points along the X, Y, and Z axes. So with this line and with this surface of this cube, this sphere, I'm going to go back and click just the sphere. And again, I'm guessing with this reference drawing about how this arm will show up, but I'm guessing like it's a skeletal plane. Like that arm is a skeleton bone, more or less. And I'm going to, now that I'm going back into this image, I'm going to actually extrude this flat face along this entire, what will be the arm. So I'm going to click this face, and it's going to select as an orange kind of selection. And I'm going to click this arm by pressing Shift, so both of them are selected. And I'm going to actually press Command E, but it's the same thing as pressing Extrude. So Command E will just extrude what should be the arm. Now it becomes this kind of like pointed thing where the end of the arm is the last division. So there's only one division. So I'm going to kind of pull up these divisions, and there's going to be tons more than what was actually originally slated for in the original tutorial, but my divisions are just different. So it just made this different kind of shape, but it's still pretty much how I want it to be, more or less. So that's kind of the start of the arm. This basic model can have more or less different shapes of arms, but with the lattice tool is when you start to pull it in. But you can also pull in various planes on this, so it doesn't really look like it's the same diameter throughout. So if I turn off this arm and say I want to select just a certain amount of planes on this arm, maybe that many, and kind of squeeze them in a little bit, it'll probably do something that's very similar, to what the other arm was. And it'll still look like what this was. And I can also play with different, I can still play with the lattice tool with this arm, but it's just made this different kind of shape. The good thing about the way they talk about in the tutorial is that these planes don't overlap. So once you get into modeling or into animation, what's happening here, so where I extruded and where it's covering this sphere, that'll become a problem. But for what we're doing right now, it's kind of like working out. I can also suggest that if you do use the lattice tool, it just takes some time to really shape up the arm and get it to exactly how you want it. But that's the basic principle behind starting this arm. And I'm probably gonna double it up and hopefully it'll look all right. One last thing, I'm just gonna click on this as an object and position it to where I want it to be so that it looks kind of more or less proper. And that could kind of do it like this, maybe like this. And then I'm going to pull it in more again so it's kind of overlapping. So there you have it. That's kind of like one other way to make an arm. And there's several ways. This is just, I think, the quickest.